Hi there. I'm Fosse Jack, co-artistic director of Novelties Theater and host of this episode of Ekphrasis, a web series where we talk to burlesque artists about art and the stories that inspire them to make it. In this episode, we are joined by one of the producers of The Vertical Sideshow and are featuring a glimpse of their full-length burlesque feature adaptation of Edgar Allan Poe's Masque of the Red Death.
Edgar Allan Poe's Masque of the Red Death was first published in 1842. The story concerns Prince Prospero, who attempts to avoid catching a deadly plague by staying inside his own house. That sounds familiar. But after 5 or 6 months of seclusion, he decides to throw a party for 1,000 other nobles and unwittingly invites the Red Death itself into his home. Okay, that's sounding really familiar. The text is widely considered an allegory, imparting the moral truth that no one can escape death, which Prospero learns at the end of the story. Poe draws inspiration from the Gothic tradition, especially the castle setting of Horace Walpole's The Castle of Otranto. Buildings are often metaphors in the Gothic tradition, sometimes for characters' mental states. In Masque of the Red Death, Prospero's abbey home acts as a metaphor for a body succumbing to disease. The stranger enters Prospero's home and makes his way from room to room, leaving a trail of dead guests in his wake, mirroring the way a deadly virus moves through the body before killing its own host. Yikes.
Hi, friends. I am pleased to be with you here on this episode of Ekphrasis and chatting with one of the producers of The Vertical Sideshow. From Chicago, welcome, Bazooka Joe. Hi, Bazooka.
Hi, Fosse. Thanks for having me. Hey, everybody out there.
Thank you so much for being with us here on this episode. I knew from the very beginning of Novelties Theater that at some point I was going to get in and get something going and get some sort of collab going with The Vertical Sideshow. And I am so excited to be here with you in this episode and to be taking a look at this really, really fun and visually stimulating piece of art that you and your fellow producers have created. So let's go ahead and get this interview started off by getting to know you a little. Would you please tell us and our readers a little bit more about The Vertical Sideshow, the work you do, and specifically the piece you're presenting in this episode?
Sure, yeah. For about 6 years, Ray Gunn and myself headed up Vertical Sideshow out of Chicago. And then recently we brought on Lola Love out of San Francisco as our third. So a little menage a trois action happening. It's been a really great process. Usually we do 1 or 2 big, large-scale live stage events per year. They're usually based off of literature or spins on classic ballets or operas or stories that are, typically generated from like classical works.
Yeah.
And then we, put them we tell those narratives through dance, circus arts, drag, live music, pole dancing, acrobatics, puppetry, a lot of different styles thrown in there. And it's all used in a way that tells the story the best way we possibly can. Like each section of every story that we tell, we really want to make sure that it's represented in a different way, and it's a way that seems appropriate for that. And so, yeah, we've been going 5 or 6 years strong, and now with the introduction of our new digital reality.
I don't know. I have really enjoyed the challenge in the small film projects that we've done at Novelties. Has it been an enjoyable process for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's been super challenging, but it's been fun the whole way. I've had to learn so many new skills, music editing, video editing, videography, Photoshop, like just all of these different skills that I never thought I would necessarily need. And now all of a sudden we need it, and we need it fast. So, but I love learning. I love that idea. And so does Ray, and so does Lola. We all like challenges. And to be honest, we would rather work on something that's going to push us and challenge us than rehash something and do something new. So in a way, it kind of forced us out of our comfort zone to create something that we never thought we could, or didn't even think was possible at the time.
So moving on, one of the things that theater, dance, and literature all share is the use of metaphor. And we're going to get a little nerdy here, and I love getting nerdy with you, Bazooka. And the use of metaphor, of stories using underlying meaning. And while the piece that you're presenting in this episode is fairly clear in its message, I have to ask, what about Poe's work drew you to use it as a metaphor for our current events?
Well, this particular story actually has several different interpretations. There's a lot of dramaturgs out there that interpret it as a different kind of allegory. And one of the prevailing ones is that it's an allegory or a metaphor for the stages of life and the inevitability of death, and how the characters try to stave off death as long as they can, but it still gets them in the end. And every colored room signifies a different stage of life, and they going that route. And then another one of the most other prevailing ones is it just happens to be very topical right now. And it's sort of like, it's sort of in that way of like, it has that very political, socioeconomic vibe to it. If there was ever a time to do this, I mean, it's almost a literal word for word translation of current events right now. You have, a pompous leader who ignores his people and ignores the signs, and he gets what he gets in the end, and he gets what he deserves, and so do all of his friends. So as far as to your question, having that sort of almost serendipitous coincidence of it being like now, in like we almost actually literally lived this story to like word for word almost. So like we had been thinking about doing the story a long time ago, and we put it off and put it off and put it off. And then all of a sudden everything came up, and we're like, we have to do this now.
Well, I think that is the true sign of a good story for the betterment of looking at it positively. A good story is one that can be told over and over and over again, and you can find meaning in it. Looking at it perhaps more nihilistically, history repeats itself. And I think that we are seeing continuing to see this, a trend that Poe probably saw something of even in his time, a trend of humans being dumb on occasion.
Yeah.
I think that history repeats itself a little bit, and I think that we see it in this. And so with that in mind, let's go ahead and take a look here at the first excerpt of Vertical Sideshow's adaptation of Mask of the Red Death.
How to note the Prince Prospero? His waist was wide, his vision narrow. His tales were tall, his temper short. He kept a sordid sort of court, with hair that make an ogre squeal, and skin quite like an orange peel. The details that come next are vague. His land was ravaged by a plague. Effects were morbid, grim, macabre, so horrid that you'd sneer and snob, so gruesome that you'd whine and wail, which I'll now recount in full detail. Red Death. The symptom that's the first to show are wild bouts of vertigo, nauseating dizzy spells that make the stomach retch and swell, and in the stomach cavity are jabbing pains of agony. Then dysentery with such force is next to follow that, of course. And what a hideous surprise when blood starts weeping from the eyes and faces blister up with sores dripping, blood from open pores. Once the face is scarlet stained, consciousness is not regained. It's such a sudden sort of death. From first inception to final breath, each victim felt the plague's full power in just the time of half 1 hour.
Well, there we have it. So the first taste of Vertical Sideshow's Mask of the Red Death, and here we are. You can see why this story and why these events of our current reality are really, really syncing up here. And so I think, Bazooka, I think that you and your crew have just done a really good job with your timing. I mean, timing is such a big part of the art form anyways, and, well, timing.
Yeah, we definitely lucked out in that sense. And again, like I said, it was something that we had been thinking about. Yeah, exactly. And took advantage. But we also didn't want to present it in a way that was beating a dead horse, right? We didn't want, I mean, like, this is something that everybody's talking about, and we didn't want to be like, plague and politics and da da da. So we wanted to tell it. We wanted to add some humor to it. Yeah. We wanted to accentuate the absurdity of the original story. I mean, it's such a graphic, dramatic story. I mean, it's so over the top, and we saw those little elements and rooms to insert a little bit of humor and sort of tongue-in-cheek references and things like that.
So what are some of the stylistic inspirations that led you to creating this particular adaptation of Mask of the Red Death?
Yeah, so this one in particular, we really wanted to keep timeless, kind of like how you mentioned before that this story kind of repeats itself and history repeats itself. So we didn't want to attribute it to any particular time or place. So we're not saying, oh, this is a story dropped in 2020, or this is a story in the 1940s, whatever. So we jump around a lot. So there's a lot of points of inspiration. There's tap dancing and sword swallowing to the song Happy Feet. Like there's, and then we jump forward into like some really like sort of high-tech futuristic animation. And then we jump back to shadow puppetry. And we go all around. And not only are we trying to like bring in a sense of sort of like a new vaudeville kind of feel, like an updated version of some really classic art forms, but we also wanted it to live in a world that didn't live in this world, in that sense, where it was like you couldn't really peg a time or place for it. So each chapter was told in a different way, and sometimes even within chapters, it's told in different styles. And then the other big point of inspiration was the text itself. I mean, again, it is such an iconic story, and there's so many phrases and stuff, and we wanted to pay homage to the actual text. So you'll see words show up on costume pieces and on the backs, like on the walls behind them and on the bottom of the screen. And sometimes it's just text only. We cut out the narration and force the audience to just read and listen to themselves and stuff like that. So there's a lot of those points of inspiration where we really wanted to keep it out of one focus.
Fantastic. I love this. And I love that this next excerpt really showcases the blending of aesthetics. Now, you have presented a variation of the finished product for us for our YouTube series. So friends, what you're seeing is a reinterpretation of the original interpretation. But I really
like Inception.
Yeah, it's
an
like
interpretation of an interpretation.
Adaptation. Just echoing into infinity. And I really love this. And I'm super excited to share this with our viewers. It's just, one small content warning for our followers. This following clip does contain some potentially gruesome images. So if you are of the squeamish persuasion, then maybe this is not for you. However, I highly encourage you to stick around for as long as you are able and enjoy this next chapter selected from The Mask of the Red Death.
The list of guests were all high-bred, the upper crust, the overfed, 222 lawmakers, baby kissers, and handshakers, 310 stars of the stage, foils of the modern age. The halves were all accounted for, and raised the sum 200 more. The silver spoon would populate another 168. As you suspect, in such these places, 900 alabaster faces, the tinted 100 that remained, were there to serve and entertain. ruckus raged on, full in power, only pausing once each hour when the aforementioned clock would toll its bells and lurch and rock. And when the chime stopped, all who seized resumed their wanton revelries. The clock struck 8, then 9, then 10, with debauchery beyond your ken. The 11th hour came and passed, the intemperance would flabbergast. And when the stroke of 12 was done, arrived guest number 1001.
All right. I just have to say that when I first saw this particular clip, I was like, oh no, that fur!
Yeah, we have the exact same. Even when we got the footage back, we're like, oh, wearing a white costume, the fur, the feathers, like everything.
All I can say is, Chin Minsky, you took a risk and you made us all uncomfortable. Brava. Brava diva. Okay, the pieces you've shared with us, Bazooka, are just 2 chapters of a greater project. Can you tell us a little more about the larger whole and let our viewers know how they can experience the uncut version or other works by your company?
Yeah. The entire version is exactly 30 minutes in length, which is a reference. Speaking of a reference of a reference of a reference, there's references to 30 minutes time within the story. So I'm not gonna. You gotta read up and figure that out yourself. To be completely warning, there are some flashing imagery. So if there's anyone with photosensitivity, there are some very disturbing images. We didn't want to shy away from paying homage to the original text. There's some nudity, so there's a lot of adult content in there. And if you're looking really close, you can see those things. The links to all of our works and trailers of past works and anything coming up from the future is always at theverticalsideshow.com. So you can find it. And we actually have it with an option to rent it on demand all the way through January. So we had the launch on December 25th, Christmas night, and then we made an option for it to be rented just like you would rent a video or anything on Amazon or whatever service you have, all the way through January. And we actually have a separate closed caption version of it, so anyone who might be hearing impaired or just needs a little extra boost in that, like, is more than welcome to rent that version. And Lola Love has actually painstakingly transcribed everything frame by frame to make sure that it was a fully accessible production. So we really wanted to make sure that, like, nobody was left out in that sense. But yeah, theverticalsideshow.com, links to that. And then again, you can see trailers of other works that we've done and announcements for shows coming up.
And Bazooka, we like to end our interviews with a what if question. And so I pose to you, if you were asked to adapt another work by Edgar Allan Poe, or maybe pick a random author, maybe your favorite author, that's fine. But what are some of the other works of classic stories or classic literature that you have in mind for the future of Vertical Sideshow? And if you could cast your star cast, who would that be? Money is no object in this particular fantasy.
Oh, that's so hard. There's so many. We're drawn to stories that have an epic feel and a lot of, like, really high concentrated drama. Also a lot of characters that can be portrayed in different ways. So, like, I personally love, and I know it's not a contemporary of Edgar Allan Poe, but I really love the idea of doing the Odyssey. I mean, you get to see so many different characters and so many different scenes. But what I'm about to say, I know you have, or at least one of your cohorts has a particular penchant for, is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. It's such an iconic story, and I do know that you have a liking for it. So this might be the official ask. Can we ask you? Would the team of Ekphrasis be involved in that if we ever did Frankenstein?
And what I will say is that you have two co-artistic directors of Novelties Theater who are quite eager to bring the works of Mary Shelley to life once more. And, let's talk, let's chat. I would absolutely love it. And so, friends, that brings us to the end of our interview and this episode of Ekphrasis. If you would like to see more of this series or other works by Novelties Theater, be sure to subscribe below. And please don't forget to hit up the Vertical Sideshow. You'll find their web address in our description. Check out their video, rent their video, see Mask of the Red Death. You won't regret it, I promise. You can also check out our reading list on bookshop.org. It's an online marketplace that supports small bookstores nationwide. You can support local bookshops by buying online during this time when online economy and commerce is so important to the survival of these small shops. So check out our reading list on bookshop.org and be sure to join us next month for episode 4 of Ekphrasis. Good night, everyone. And Bazooka Joe, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Good night.
Night.
Thanks for watching Ekphrasis, a production of Novelties Theater. If you enjoyed this episode, we invite you to make a tax-deductible donation through the link in the video description. And don't forget to like and subscribe below so you don't miss our next episode featuring Mix Pucks Aplenty and Fig by Danny Janae.